You are now rocking with the best. This is the Hall About Sports podcast with your host, the one and only Meg Hall. If you don't know, now you know. We are back after a several week hiatus. I have been running the entire Atlanta area wild. Uh, just been honestly, trying to get the brand out there, trying to get myself, out there and establish myself in the media circles. But we're back. Co-host Kev is not here tonight. He had some family things he's got to take care of, so he'll be back with us on next episode. But I do have a guest with me, of course. Of course, we got a guest. So we've got, I met this guy in some AFC South spaces, and he's probably one of the most reasonable Titans fans I know. So I was like, we have to get him on. Got to talk a little bit of Titans. And it's Mr. Courtlandt Griffin. Thank you so much for hopping on.
I'm glad to be here. Meg's one of the few realistic and actually like understanding Colts fans. Like it's kind of odd, right? You meet certain people and you're like, you're nothing like the ones that I know. Interesting.
I try. I do what I can. All right, so let's just do a quick rundown of what we're going to talk about tonight. So, of course, as you know, it is the starting lineup. This is who are you? What do you do? How did you get here? We're going to do a special segment for Courtlandt. It's called Cream of the Crop with Courtlandt. You guys know I love a good pun, a good alliteration. I'm full of those. So we got some things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about NBA and WNBA. And then, of course, we're going to do our favorite part of the show, which is the post-game presser. You get to ask us whatever questions are on your heart, like is cereal soup? Who's your top 5 athletes all the time? If you're, if you're Dr. J, it's going to be who's your top 10 NBA players all the time and leave LeBron James off. But it is whatever's on your heart's desire. It's whatever's on your heart's desire. And we'll go from there. All right, so let's start at the top. So tell me how you got to this point. How did you get into sports journalism? Let's start there.
So I was an athlete in college, and then I had dreams of going, of course, like anybody who played the sport, you had dreams of going pro and making money and all of these things. But one thing that I always prided myself on is being having a knowledge of the game, being a historian. Just always wanted to know the numbers and how did we get here? How did someone like me get here, right? Somebody had to come before me. Somebody had to inspire someone and like me, right? Who inspired the person that inspired me? And I got a gift of gab. Anybody can tell you since I was a young kid, I could argue with a brick wall. You let me. And I would go to the barbershop. I would argue after I had a car wreck back in 2013 that ended up ending my playing career. And I had to find something. I had to find an outlet. And one of those outlets was sitting down playing 2K, but also watching a lot of Stephen A. Smith, NBA First, like First Take and Fox, Undisputed and those things. And I found a passion just to argue sports and be able to talk it. And when I met my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. She got tired of me hearing me talk about sports with no end. She got tired of my friends got tired of me arguing sports, and I started flooding, Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp, and I was making like little snippet videos, and I'll send them to them in like the DMs on Twitter and Instagram, like, hey man, get me on the show. All I need is 5 minutes, man. Y'all give me a 2-minute segment, blah, 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 blah. And I ended up meeting Raphael Haynes, did his show Battlegrounds on the 3-point conversion. He asked me to be part of the team, and now I'm here. I cover the NBA, WNBA, NFL, NHL, MLS, whatever sport it is, I cover it now. And these are rooms that I never thought I'd be in. This past year was probably one that if I told younger me 3 years ago that you would go from being a regular guy with a regular job to being a sports journalist, rubbing elbows with Rob Parker and Chris Broussard and Shannon Sharp and meeting Stephen A. Smith at the Super Bowl, I probably would have laughed at you, and now I'm here. So I get to do shows like this, and I get to talk sports, and people respect my acumen. And it's been a fun ride. And the only thing I'm waiting on now is that blue check mark by my name, Elon. If you just want to do that without me having to play for Twitter Blue, that'd be great. And we'll see where Courtlandt is in about 3 more years. And because in 3 years I'm here, I'm doing a show with Meg, so which probably would have been doing this 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and we'll see in 3 more years where Courtland is.
Okay. Okay. I love that. I love that for you. That is an awesome journey. I love hearing how people like, are experiencing things they never thought they would. I think in doing that, so you're telling your story, and I assume you're telling other people's stories along the way as well. So how do you go about crafting your stories? What do you do when you're making a story about any sport?
So my goal in getting into journalism, because I didn't go to school for this,
Mm,
was I knew what it was like to have a microphone in my face, and I knew what it was like to see a headline with your name in it, or see a column with where your name is mentioned, and have a quote, and that quote be twisted to fit that reporter or that journalist's vision in their story.
mm,
And I always wanted to kind of bridge the gap between a reporter, that journalist, and the athlete. I wanted the athletes to be able to trust me, be able to trust the media.
mm,
We see it, Meg, right? We watch basketball and football to see
absolutely.
Marshawn Lynch get up there and say, "I'm just here so I don't get fined," or Kyrie Irving and not Raphael Haynes, not you. Shout out to him though. But KD and Kyrie Irving, right? Get up there and talk about how the media tries to twist their words. So when I'm crafting the story, I ask questions in a way that, hey, you're a real person, and I understand what goes on in the locker room. But I don't want to know about why you had, why you're a 20-point per game scoring, you had a bad scoring night. What I want to know is what is the mindset now going into the next game, right? How do you change this? I want to know, like with Aziz, I used this year, right? I was at Titans camp asking Aziz Al-Shaair, what is it like coming from San Francisco, being under Fred Warner, and now you're coming in as the presumed starter? Like, how is that? You're a guy who never started in the NFL, and now you're coming in and thrusting you into that leadership role. I want to know what you feel. I want to connect with the player more or less than connect with the numbers that are on a ledger, and just treat you like you're one of many because you're an individual person. I want those players, when they see Courtlandt Griffin's name in that author slot, right, and they read that article and they see their name, they see their quotes, I want them to understand that, hey, this is not just a journalist trying to make a story and make $1 off my name. This is a guy who's putting my story and the things that I said into context, and he's my conduit. He's my mouthpiece, and he's doing right by me. So when I do stories, I want to make sure that players know you can trust Courtland. If you can't trust anybody else, you can trust me. And I was an athlete. I knew, like I said, I know how it is to get your name out there and see your words twisted. And I just want these guys to understand that there are media members that care. Right? There are media members that used to be there and used to be in the locker room, or play the game, and we know the game. And some of us actually do care that your words mean something. We don't want you to feel like you're out there alienated by yourself.
I feel that. I feel that 100%. I would say, as someone who's new to the space myself, I'm slowly learning about, building the relationships and importance of asking the right questions. Because you can get in there and you can ask the standard sort of questions, but I think what really gets people to trust you is asking the right questions, asking about them, asking about what their deeper thoughts are. And I'm still figuring out what that looks like, but to hear someone else say that like out loud in real time is great as well, because it lets me know, okay, like, hey, we're on the same wavelength. Like, I'm trying to make sure that the stories that I write are truthful. I'm trying to make sure that they also carry a little bit of weight and meaning as well. Like, there's so many stories that you read out loud now from multiple outlets, and you're like, who approved this? Like, what is this? And I don't want that for my stories. I want people to read my stories and be like, okay, you know what? I learned something. This was impactful to me, and it's memorable. So kudos to you. Absolutely. I love that for you. And I love that you're taking the opportunity and the onus to do that.
And I'll say this, Meg, like, as someone I've only been doing this for 3 years now, but like you said, you're new to the space. I always ask the question that I feel like no one is going to ask, right? The question that it's out there, but someone's probably in that media room scared to ask it, right? And if you're that person, 9 times out of 10, the question that everyone is scared to ask is the question that needs to be asked, right? Like if I were you and, I was invited to, indie camp, I would ask Jonathan Taylor, like, hey man, like, we understand what the rumors are going, swirling around right now, but you're still in Colts, blue and white. Are you looking? What's the outlook for this season, right? Like, I wouldn't ask him like, what team you gonna go to? No, that's the obvious question. Like, what are you gonna do when you suit up on Sunday with that horseshoe on your helmet, right? Because that's the one that probably no one's gonna ask that everyone should ask, right? Or everyone's afraid to ask because they don't want to. Oh, well, why would you ask that? He's got a trade room out there. Well, there's no guarantee. He's still on the contract for the Colts. Mm-hmm. So it's those kind of questions that let players know that, hey, I'm not going to put a disingenuous story out. Mm-hmm. I want to know, because when you go home to your family, you're still in the Colts blue and white. You still have a horseshoe on your gear. You still have a locker space in that locker room, right? Mm-hmm. Number 28, it's still on that, on that placard. They haven't removed you. They haven't pushed you out the door. You're still here. So until the foreseeable future comes, right, or until a trade rumor and we all get those notifications, you're a Colt, right? Yeah. So that's the question that I would want to ask. So, it's hard, right, to navigate because you don't want to tick a player off and you don't want to piss off the A&R, PR guy, right, because you want to be invited back. But it's those questions that those players recognize your face and say, hey, I remember her, because she asked a question that no one else would.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to do that, right? Like I've already, had a moment like that where I asked a question and it wasn't really a tough question, but I knew it might get an interesting answer from an athlete. And I don't, again, I know that athletes are going to get questions that they don't like or they're not, fans of or whatever else, but I always appreciate the honest answers back. And so I'm like, okay, so if I ask a question, I try to be honest with you and I think, they're honest back. So, and speaking of Jonathan Taylor, so that's a good segue, honestly, to our middle section with you. We have cream of the crop with Courtlandt. So I wanted to ask several questions about the NFL, and we'll also get to the WNBA because I'm covering that now as well. And I figured, hey, why not get Courtlandt as well and his thoughts? But I am actually going to Colts camp next week, which, believe it or not, I can't even believe that's next week. But I am, I'll be there on.
I didn't even know that, so that's dope.
Yeah, so this is kind of crazy that all this is happening right now. Like, and I will be there to kind of chop it up with some of the local media as well. And again, like, to provide my perspective. I'm super excited that Colts Wire is, afforded me the opportunity to do that. So shout out to USA Today and Colts Wire. But one of the things that I was just telling my husband was, I was like, man, the stories that are going to come out of this. I was like, I'm my hope, hey, my hope is that the team will and Jonathan Taylor will, resolve their issues before then. That would be phenomenal, right? In an ideal situation. But my question to you is, of course, the Colts and Jonathan Taylor are still hashing out their differences. He's asked for a trade. My question to you is, if you were Chris Ballard, would you honor that request? And if so, what are you asking for in return? What seems feasible?
If I'm Chris Ballard, yes, right? Why not kick the tires? As a GM in the NFL, right, your job is to make sure that this team is in the best position to win, right? Also, your job as a GM is to also make sure that this team's locker room and that culture stays intact. The one thing that you don't want is a disgruntled player who's, in there just because you want to be spiteful, right? How you requested a trade. The Colts are in an interesting position, right? You've got a rookie quarterback in the fold. You've got a young receiver, right, and a core that's still trying to figure itself out, right? Where the Colts were probably one of the most consistent teams in the NFL when it came to personnel for years, right? They had Peyton Manning, you had Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, and Dallas Clark, and then you go right out of that into Andrew Luck, well, a year of Curtis Painter. We don't talk about those years, right? But you go into essentially right after that, right? You go into Andrew Luck, and you have, I can't name the tight end that you guys had, but I know for a fact you guys had T.Y. Hilton and that group for a long time.
Coby Fleener was one of the
Coby Fleener, right? Yeah, man. Yeah. That's probably why I probably compartmentalized it. But I mean, you had T.Y. Hilton and those guys, right? So you've always been consistent. Now you're trying to find that consistency again. If I'm Ballard, then yes, I'm honoring that request. I'm calling teams that need a running back. one of the main examples I could use is I'm calling the Vikings. Hey, we've got a guy who's been fairly healthy, right? You guys just released Dalvin Cook. What about a second round pick next year? A second and a fourth, and then maybe in 2025, can I get like a third, another third? So like a second and 2/3, or a second, a fourth, and a third, right? And see where we go, right? Or I'll take an expiring contract off of you, right? I'll take the Neil Hunter. Why not? You know what I'm saying? Like it's one of those, like, you take my disgruntled player that you need, right? And then I'll take an expiring contract and 3 picks. Or I'm calling the Bills. Hey, you've run into the Chiefs year in and year out. The one thing people keep saying is you need a running back, right? You haven't signed Dalvin Cook. Here's Jonathan Taylor, one of the best running backs in the NFL, arguably the number 2 or 3 guy in the NFL when he's healthy. You pair him with Josh Allen, right? It sounds a little bit, that's enticing. You guys don't need that first round pick next year. You know what I'm saying? Like, or you don't need that second round pick next year. It's not going to be high enough for you to even make an impactful pick. Maybe you're going to trade, because these GMs are always thinking a year in advance, right? So that first round pick may be a glorified second round pick, because maybe they trade back because they're going to be a playoff team. So it's one of those situations, and taken out of the scenario part of it, for Jonathan Taylor, who's I think just now turning like 25, maybe in the prime of his career, rushed for 1,800 yards, just a year removed from rushing for 1,800 yards, had an injury, riddled season last year, but still was on pace for, I think, 1,210 last year. The year before that, rushed for 1,100, has been a consistent dual threat back since he hit the NFL. Mind you, he wasn't the starter his first year in the NFL.
Right.
And still rushed for 1,100. He became the starter and rushed for almost 2,000. So we've seen what this guy can do when he's behind a good offensive line with good coaching, and how he can carry an offense. Because he was jockeying for Derrick Henry for the best running back. For a while, people were saying Jonathan Taylor's the best running back in the NFL, and it was a big debate. So with that being said, I think a second round pick, a third round pick, and a pick the next year, right? So 2025 second, 2025 third, and a pick the next year is more than substantial to, and that's being fair, because people are saying that the running back position is devalued, but you still need those guys, right? You still need that runner. You still need that guy when it gets cold and that ball gets hard. This is still football at its essence. So you still need that guy to carry the rock for you. And Jonathan Taylor is a force multiplier. He's one of the, and I use that a lot, he's one of the few guys that adds wins and makes guys better when he's on the field. And yes, the Colts will miss him, but if I'm Ballard, yes, I'm honoring that request. I'm at least listening to offers. But my hopes are, if I'm Chris Ballard, my hopes are we keep 28 in blue and white, and we get a deal done.
Yeah. And I'll say this. I think where this gets interesting is the timing of this request, the timing of this shift into like, hey, I didn't get what I wanted by being kind of the passive guy that I typically am, where I'm like, yeah, hey, I got a contract, they're going to honor it, I'm going to honor it. And, hey, it'll work themselves out. So now we're seeing this dramatic shift into, no. I want to be paid. And when I say I want to be paid, I want to be paid like one of the top backs in the league, which Taylor makes obviously a very good argument, right? Like no one's denying the talent. I think where it gets tricky is the timing, right? The running back market as it is has significantly decreased in the last, I would say, year. Like ever since CMC got his deal, like it's just kind of been going down since then, right? And if you're Jonathan Taylor, that's where you're starting, because you are in the upper echelon, what I like to call the unicorns of the NFL, because there's not too many running backs left like that, right? So if you're Jonathan Taylor, yeah, you're starting there. The problem is no one, in my opinion, currently is going to want to start there either. You just saw Aaron Jones in Green Bay, who was making 16, restructured to take 11, right? You just saw Saquon also take about 11. Franchise tag and then incentives to bet on himself and then to come back to the table, right? So this makes me think that if Taylor were to come through and say, hey, you know what, I'll take 13, 14, I really don't feel like there's going to be a ton of folks who are going to balk at that number, right? Like it's high, but it's not like, 16 mil plus high. I think where he's kind of gotten himself into a little bit of a conundrum is the value is gone. What you want is probably likely not there. Also, the Colts have already come out and Jim Irsay is like, no, we're not trading you. Like, carry on. This is business.
And that's where I think that's where it's going to. Jim Irsay is he's entering that Jerry Jones kind of era as an owner, right? Where it's like it's time to take your hands out of the pot. I'll say this as a Titans fan, and people get mad when I do this because I always talk about the Titans, but it's easy because I've been a fan for so long. Bud Adams, rest his soul, was one of the best owners we could possibly have until he got old. Like it's fair until he got old, and he stopped wanting to pay players. He stopped wanting to make upgrades to the stadium, and it hurt us. It wasn't until Amy, shout out to Amy Adams Strunk, started opening up the pocketbook, built new facilities, got the new uniforms pushed. She's made such strides to get free agents and make Nashville and the Tennessee Titans a free agent market, and also a market where players can feel like, hey, we want to play there for the rest of our careers. That it wasn't until that we started seeing this team and this franchise turn around. Now, the Colts have had a little bit more success than the Titans have over the decades or so, right? But Jim Irsay has to take his hands out of it. He has to let Ballard do his job as a GM and make this team functional, because unless you do that, right, when a player comes to you and says, hey, I love playing for this franchise, but you guys don't, we have reached an impasse. I don't feel like you guys are going to give me what I'm looking for and what I need for my family. And that's going to hurt the product that I put on the field. I'd rather be somewhere else than here. You got to honor that in some way, right? Or at least make it look like you're trying to. I agree with you. $13 to $14 million a year. It's not horrible. We paid Derrick Henry, I think, 15, and that was like top running back money a couple years ago. So with the market being reset, and if I was a running back, I would be trying to punch Travis Etienne and those guys and like Joe Mixon in the face, like for their comments, because it's like, way to go, guys, way to cut us off at the knees because we don't do the things that you guys do, right? I'm not a wide receiver, right, who plays running back. Not to CMC and those guys, but I'm not a 1,000-yard receiving, 1,000-yard rushing guy. I'm a 1,500 plus rushing and maybe 450-yard receiving guy. But I'm still a dual threat. You still have to respect me, and I still am going to go down in the history books as one of the best to ever do this. I deserve to get paid just like you do. And if I'm those guys, if I'm Jonathan Taylor, like I got some words. I need phone numbers, and I got some words for those guys.
I mean, I think it makes for a very interesting conversation. We'll see what happens. Like I said, I'll be at Colts camp next week, and I expect to have some thoughts there. I'll give my thoughts and analysis then. But I think again, it's a good thing. I've been experiencing a lot of history this season covering teams, so I'm looking forward to it. Sure. All right, so we'll keep in the NFL. We'll talk about your Titans. So I want to ask this question. So DeAndre Hopkins, obviously he's joined the Titans, which is a massive upgrade for their wide receiver unit, right? That's no slight to Treylon Burks and everyone else, but it is a massive upgrade, right? Correct. So my question to you is over or under 1,500 yards for D-Hop and 10 touchdowns?
I'm going to go with the under, and that's not a knock to him. And the reason I go with the under is because the Titans have a very underrated wide receiving core. And I'm not saying that because I'm a fan. I'm just saying that from what my naked eyes have seen on the field at camp. Treylon Burks, before there was even a DeAndre Hopkins rumor to swirl around Nashville, right, was already on pace to be a number one receiver. The guy came in shape. He stayed in Nashville. He ran. He got his body right. He looks like a totally different person. And his attitude changed, right? With that second year, confidence is there. Even if he hits a wall, right, you can see, hey, I'm poised and ready. Kyle Phillips put on 15, I would say about, or it looks around 10 to 15 pounds heavier, a little bit more durable. He missed all of last year with nagging injuries. He's now better. Looks like he's in a way better shape. He's your slot receiver. And then adding other guys like Chris Moore, Trayshawn Harrison, I believe, the undrafted rookie out of Oklahoma State, right? These different guys that are there and they're present and they're running routes and they're catching balls and they're making flashes and making plays. It doesn't take away from DeAndre Hopkins being a great, like still a top 10 receiver. It just is a testament to the guys that are going to get targets and get open, because his statement was, I'm going to make your job easier. So I would say he still is somewhere around. And when he signed, I said this on my podcast, I said, if DeAndre Hopkins still gives you 1,107, 5 to 7, that is still top 10 receiver, production, right? Definitely when you have a guy in Treylon Burks who can give you 1,005. You have a guy in Kyle Phillips who can still go out there and give you 500 to 700 and 2 or 3 touchdowns. And then you got to think about Chigo Okonkwo. No one ever talks about the tight ends in these conversations. Chigo Okonkwo was one of the better tight ends in limited time in a limited role last year. That's not going to change this year when he's had a bigger workload. So he's also a guy that can give you around that 750 to 806 touchdown top tight end kind of production. So when I hear it and I see that, like, no, if he does, great, right? Yay, right, for the Titans, right? But if he doesn't, we're not hurting, because we have guys and despite getting rid of AJ Brown, he did yield some kind of fruit, which was Treylon Burks. So yeah, so
I mean, I won't go down the path of kind of
we don't want to pull the scab off
the book of sins of John Robinson. I won't do that for you. But that's honestly, I look forward to seeing what the Titans wide receivers do. The key for the Titans, in my opinion, is staying healthy, and that's everyone across the board. That's offense and defense, especially your defense. You guys were very banged up down the stretch, but I look forward to seeing what the Titans do. Of course, other than when they play the Colts.
That's fair.
But all right, so we got 2 other questions I want to get to as well for you. So we're gonna switch a little bit. WNBA is where I'm asking questions. So if you didn't know, in case you've been living underneath the rock, I've been covering the Atlanta Dream this season. Been super blessed to be able to do it. I'll say this very transparently, been passively a fan of the WNBA. I watched way more NBA before, but I personally felt like the WNBA deserved way more coverage. They've got some phenomenal athletes, some great human beings who absolutely deserve more coverage and more stories told about them. So whenever I decided, like, hey, this is what I want to do and tell stories in a way that's impactful, let's start with the WNBA. So been blessed and afforded the opportunity to cover the Dream, which has put me in some great WNBA circles. I'm getting some phenomenal people, but I also realized I'm like, oh, there's some juicy conversations going on right now in the WNBA. So they are, if you don't know, they are making their playoff push. So my question to Courtlandt, because hey, this is going to go along the way of this playoff push, is first thing. So it's already assumed that the Aces will be in the finals, right? And side note, they're playing the Dream tonight, so you'll catch my thoughts on that as well. But it's already assumed that the Aces will be in the finals. Who is meeting them there?
I'm sticking with my preseason pick that I picked, and I've been sticking with it. It's the New York Liberty. Got to ride the ladies in Seafoam Green. I covered that team. I saw, it was a couple of years ago when they were struggling. They had signs of being a very good team. Sabrina Ionescu, when Natasha Howard was there, and all of those players. So it was a fun time, right? They would win games, they would lose some games, they would win some games, they would lose some games. It was up and down. Now you've got JJ there. Now you've got Breanna Stewart, which I called, by the way. Like people thought I was crazy. I said Breanna Stewart. I said Stewie to the New York Liberty. It's going to happen. Oh no, she's never leaving Seattle. Okay. Look at where number 30 is there now. So, but you got Sab, who's now playing in that leadership role, right? She's now finally being able to be that shooter that she was coming out of college. We're now seeing that potential realized. And what's crazy is out of all of the players that they have, right, not only do you bring in one half of the Vanderquigs, right, and hopefully, we get both halves of the Vanderquigs in New York. But, we're going to let her take her time, and we'll see what happens. But not only that, but people forget that Nigel Laney is one of the most lethal scorers in the NBA, and she's considered the 5th best player on this team. Like,
I was about to say, like, when you start listing people, it's not that you're disrespecting Whitney,
right,
because you're not, but yeah, it's literally
she's
like, okay, hold on, let's go down this list.
She's considered the 5th best player on this team, and I think that says a lot. Like, yes, the Aces have been playing together for, you know, a couple of years now, and they've got that kind of chemistry that you see, like, and to kind of liken it to the NBA, right? It's like the Warriors or the Spurs, where they just play off each other without thinking.
Yep.
This is the Miami, like New York is the Miami Heat from like 2010, 2014, where that first year they were like LeBron and D Wade and Chris Bosh were trying to figure out how to play with each other. And then we're starting to see where they were kind of clunk. Okay, we got to try to figure out how to fit JJ into the game plan. Okay, now it's kind of clunky. Now it's starting to move a little bit. You see the ball movement. You see JJ finding her spots. She's getting more involved in the offense. But Nyjah's getting more involved in the offense, being more of a facilitator, but also finding her spots to score and filling those spots where someone is kind of having an off night. You're starting to see that now. So, yeah, I got to go with New York. I think New York is going to meet the Aces in the finals, or we're going to get that David – well, I shouldn't say David versus Goliath. We're going to get the Goliath, like two giants that meet each other, and we're going to see who's the better team.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad pick at all. Honestly, I don't think it's a bad pick at all. I've been asking that question to quite a few people. So you're probably you're probably say second or third person who has listed the Liberty as like, yeah, I see.
If I had to challenge them, if I had to give a dark horse, probably Connecticut.
They're my other pick. I think and here's the thing, like, I think for anyone who's going to challenge the Aces, like you're going to need depth, because that starting unit is, it's lethal. Out of this world lethal. Now where they have, and this is crazy to say this, but where they have a weakness, put that in soft quotes, or where they might get a little shaky is when you get further down in the roster in the depth. So if you've got a strong bench, like, use it to your advantage, get production out of everybody, because that, in my opinion, that's the only way that you are going to go, toe to toe, pound for pound with them, so to speak.
Well, the Liberty have that, and if you look at it, when they take when they take Sluty off the court, you have Maureen Johannes, who is probably one of the best difficult shot makers I've ever seen. Like, almost every game this year, you can probably go and look at a New York Liberty highlight where she's taking a jump shot from deep off of one leg, leaning away, and just like throwing it up and watching it. And then she just runs down the court and it falls. Like, you have you have these guys, right? Shout out to Sato Sabali, who we'll probably talk about in a second, right? Her sister, people forget, her sister plays for this team.
Yes.
Like, and her sister's no slouch. Like, they're both dogs on the court. And I like to call her Junior Sato, because she's just now scratching the surface of what she can do. She's a great rebounder, a good defender, and she can score. These are the players that you got coming off the bench. So when you take JJ off the court, you're putting, Sabali Jr. in there, right? And you're putting Maureen Johannes in there, and you've got to guard those two players. They're not just two young players that you can say, like, they're rookies, or they're second-year players, or they're still young, they're still trying to figure it out. Maureen can kill you. And her shooting is not even her best attribute. Her passing is ridiculous. Like, she will throw one, like, some behind the back weird, like, cross court skip pass that you're like, no way that's gonna make it. It's a steal, and it's an assist. So, and her movement without the ball, like you said, you got to have depth. New York has that. I think Sandy was still trying to figure out how to work it into the game plan. I think she's figuring that out now. And that's just where Sandy Brondio is such a great coach in the WNBA. She does well when she has a lot of talent, right? When she doesn't have a lot of talent, and this is going to sound really weird and counterintuitive when we're talking sports, but when she doesn't have a lot of talent, her coaching, she tries to overcompensate. She leans on the star, right? The best player on that team. We saw it in Phoenix when she had, it was just Skylar Diggins Smith, right? And like Skylar Diggins would go down and she would lean on Diana Taurasi, right? And we saw that. So Now she doesn't have to lean on any one player. JJ can go off for 30. Of course, Breonna Stewart's going to go off and give you.
I was going to say, please don't forget her.
Yeah, ridiculous amounts, right? Possibly, I would say restaking her claim as the best player in the WNBA.
Ooh.
And then of course, Nigel can give you 20. Sab can give you 20. Marine can give you 20 off the bench. Sluty can give you a great shooting night and give you 20 and 10. These are the kind of players that you have in the squad. And I'm kind of biased because I covered these ladies and I got a soft spot for New York. But yeah, I just can't wait to see. Hopefully they make it to the finals. Hopefully this doesn't age like spoiled milk. So hopefully they make it there and we get to see them, go up against New York New York go up against Las Vegas, because I think the last two meetings, it's been close in like the first half, and then the second half, Vegas just takes off.
Does Vegas things.
Yeah, and so, but I don't think this is the same team. I think New York has grown after each loss, and that's what makes a champion is what happens when you lose, right? Because everybody can win when you have talent. When you lose and you have that kind of talent, that's where Sab has to come in and step in and be a leader. That's where Breonna has to come in and step in and be a leader, because she's hoisted a championship trophy. She's hoisted an MVP before. So she knows what this road looks like. And as ministers, people are going to talk about the Seattle Storm. Go look at those Seattle Storm years that they won a championship. It wasn't all roses, right? They were a very good team, but it wasn't all roses. They met and had some dogfights in those finals appearances. They had some dogfights where it looked like they could lose and they could, be out of the playoffs. And Breonna did her thing. Stewie did her thing, right? Of course, she had Sue Bird, possibly one of the top 3 greatest players to ever play in the W, on her side. But that's where she has to now be the Sue Bird for the New York Liberty.
I got you. Okay. So you said something in there that I thought was very interesting about Stewie kind of reestablishing herself as potentially the best player in the WNBA. So my question to you is, obviously, we know that, the WNBA has some serious talent like Stewie on its hands. So would you consider Stewie for any of these, obviously? And I'm just, kind of naming these. So you have MVP. That was one of the things that I threw out at you, I think, earlier when we were chit-chatting. And this is not Stewie, obviously, for Rookie of the Year, but we're going to talk about it. Rookie of the Year, Sixth Woman of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and, of course, Most Improved Player. So any of those titles, of course, I'm putting that very loosely.
I think MVP is fair. I think MVP is fair. She's been cooking since like the second or third game. Even the first game she came out, she was kind of feeling her way around, right? But she's been cooking. I mean, every week she's a player of the week. She's a player to watch, top performer, you name it, she's in that conversation. And I think her star shines brighter when she has the spotlight on her and she's able to do the things she does. She's one of the better outside shooters in the game. When she's in the paint, she gets the work done. Defensively, I think is where she's shined the most this year. You don't get the ball inside the paint and not see Stewie there to bother it. And Asia Wilson, as good as Asia was last year on defense, I'm not saying that that's Stewie, right? I don't think Stewie is a defensive player of the year outright like Asia was last year. Asia had a ridiculous year last year when she took home both Defensive Player of the Year and MVP. But I would not be surprised if you heard Breonna's name mentioned in that top 5 kind of finalist category. But she's definitely the MVP this year. I think it's hands down she's the MVP.
Okay. So and the reason I asked this was because I was actually in a space yesterday with WNBA and several folks from around the league. And these were some of the questions they asked, and the answers varied across. But I did see a lot of people saying Asia for MVP and Asia for DPOY as well, again. So my question to you is, like, do you think she would win those again, like in back-to-back years?
It's hard to do that in any sport. It's hard to win best player in the game, right? And then best defense, like best specialized player in the game. To me, Ezzie McElroy has had the better defensive year. you look at what she's done in Seattle, even though they haven't had a very good year this year. And that's going to play into it, right? I just think Ezzy deserves to get that award, right? And it's hard for me to not give Ezzy Nakamura the flowers that she deserves. Now, that's not to crap on Asia. She could very well win it.
Mm-hmm.
The Aces have only lost 2 games, and she's a big part of that. She's a big part of their defense and how they lock in and the leadership portion. But Ezzy just defensively has been the better defender. And possibly the best defender, in my opinion, in the WNBA. But it's not to take anything away from Asia. I think she could definitely win the Defensive Player of the Year. But MVP is coming back to New York. That is Breanna Stewart's award to lose at this point in time. And, I mean, when you're the number 2 team in the WNBA, you only lost 6 games, right? And it's in no part to Breanna Stewart's performance.
Yeah, I watched it in person, and I was like, I mean, so the crazy thing is, I think we were talking about it before, but Jody Newsome, and shout out to Jody. Jody covers the Dallas Wings. I remember this was a couple days before Atlanta had played the Liberty, and Joey was texting me, and she's like, hey, Stewie's going off right now. She was like, just watch out for her when y'all get her. And I was like, okay, all right, like, hey, we'll see, in person or whatever else. Oh my goodness. Just completely unconscious on the court. There were some things that she threw up that I was like, there's no way that's going in. Like, there's no way. And it just went in. Like, it just and I was like, what is happening? What am I seeing? And the thing is, it wasn't that like, hey, Atlanta wasn't playing, because they were, but Stu is just, I mean, it didn't matter what you threw at her. She was just going off completely.
She is like the LeBron James, like Kevin Durant kind of esque, right? Where it's like, it doesn't matter what you do, how you do it, she's going to get hers, right? Mm-hmm. It's everyone else that you hope has an off night. But Breanna Stewart, when number 30 hits the court and she ties up those Pumas, you're going to have a rough night on your hand. So it's one of those. And Candace Parker was that for a while, right? For a long time in the league. Who's another player that was okay? I'll give you that. Asia Wilson is that, right? There's a couple of players in the WNBA. I'll give even Enrique Ogunbowale, right? She is another player. Like, it doesn't matter what you do. When they hit the court, it is a handful to deal with those players. And I'll give some love to Ryan Howard, right? She's also a dog, and she's also becoming that now, right? She's now in her. I think she'll be entering her 3rd season next year, I believe.
Yeah, this is her 2nd season.
So it's her 2nd season. She's going to be one of those players that you say when we play Atlanta, right? It's you got to guard. That person with Howard on the back of their jersey, you got to guard. So.
Yeah, and I'm a little biased. Like I said, I've you probably seen me tweet it, but I've said Ryan is a walking bucket. Walking bucket. There again, she's also one of those who, like, I mean, and let me say this, for a player who's in her 2nd season, she's so good already. And I can't wait to see her like continue to ascend. And Coach talks about it all the time, and she's like, Ryan is a generational talent. And it's crazy because watching that in person, I mean, let me be biased for a minute. I said that in my mind. I was like, what am I witnessing here? And I'm thinking, okay, like maybe just because I'm sitting here, like, deep in the trenches, like I'm just seeing this from my lens. But when Coach understands someone who has played the game, and obviously this was, before Ryan has, graced the court here, Coach is saying, no, this is the upper echelon, like here in terms of talent, and she is continuing to build. And I did ask her a question just a couple days ago because I really wanted to kind of pick her brain. And I'm like, hey, you are already breaking milestones, like left and right. Like, Coach is getting tired of us asking questions about you because we know all the milestones you're breaking. That's how often it's happening. But when all this is said and done, like, what impact do you hope to leave on the WNBA? And she said, yeah, I was talking to someone about this the other day, and I really feel like you always hear about, oh, this is the only thing this is what's happened since Candace Parker. She was like, I want to have that impact. But when I'm playing, I'm not thinking about these records. I'm just playing. And I think that's the best part. Obviously, I don't think, to say that the players don't know what records, there are coming from. They know. They know, but for Ryan, she's not concentrating on that. She's just out there playing free. She's out there doing the things that she loves, and it's so awesome to see that. So when you see talent like that, and you see these other players, from other teams, come through, and you see that same sort of carefree spirit where they just absolutely love basketball. It is so awesome to see. And again, like it wasn't Atlanta, it wasn't the team I covered, but watching Stewie go off, I was like, what am I like?
It's hard not to revel in great players, right? When I covered New York, and New York played, of course, Seattle, I was the same way. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be a walk in the park, right? We got Natasha, right? Her former teammate, she knows all of her moves. It didn't matter. Like Stewie just kind of went out there and was like, okay, you know that I like to shoot over my left shoulder when I'm on the right block. It's fine. I'll go for the right shoulder, right? Like, and so it's in transition, I like the elbow three. It's fine. I'll go to the top of the key, right? And like she's a cerebral killer. No matter what you think you got on her, she just does it. And like you said, Ryan is going to be there. She's one of those. Satu Sabri is going to be there. She's one of those. Yeah. And there's so many players we can name, right? We can sit here and talk. I could talk WNBA for hours, right? Because there's so many players, and there's such a different brand of basketball than the NBA. I'm not saying that the NBA is a slouch. I just think that the WNBA has more players that love the game and love what they do. And I think it makes for a better product when you look at it from that lens. Like you said, we're fans, but we're also media members that get to fan, for lack of better terms, fangirl over some of our favorite players, right? Regardless if we cover them or not. So, and it's just surreal when you see these ladies play, because, like I said, I remember watching Candace Parker under Pat Summitt at UT, and I was like, yeah, she's got it. She's the it. She's her, right? Yeah. And she did nothing but come into the league and is still cooking, right? To this day, the real, and in my mind, sorry, Chris Paul, she's the real CP3. So she's still cooking. So it's not a bad thing to revel and kind of relish in these ladies and when they accomplish things, because, like I said, Ryan is going to be one of those players that we look at 2, 4, 6, 8 years from now and say, yeah, she was one of the greatest to ever touch the court in the WNBA.
Man, that would be phenomenal, honestly, to see. And I know she'll do it. I know she'll do it. All right, so we got post-game presser. So this is the part of the podcast / show where the guests get to ask me burning questions they have. Like I mentioned earlier, is cereal soup? What is a theme song that would play if you walked into a room? Anything of that nature. What do you got for me? And I'll do my best to answer.
Oh, man. Okay, I have a question. So you're new to the WNBA, right? You're new to WNBA kind of coverage, right?
Yep.
Who are your top 5 current WNBA players?
That's a good question. I think you can't have that list without Asia Wilson being on that list. Like, let's start there. I'm obviously biased because I cover them, but Ryan Howard is absolutely on that list. Sure. That's a no doubter. I would say Arike from the Wings is in that conversation for me. Stewie is definitely like a sight to behold.
I know it's tough.
Yeah, I'm like, names are coming to me, and I'm trying to. How many did I just name? 3, 4? Yep. That was 4, I think.
I think 4.
And only one more.
It's no disrespect to anybody if you leave them off, I promise.
Yeah, it's not, because this is so hard to do. All right, I'm gonna throw it out there because she is still balling at her age, and that's not a slight to her, but hey, she's older than most of the folks in the league right now. DeWanna Bonner has been balling, absolutely balling. I watched her against the Dream, just walking terror. Like, just, oh my goodness. And she's continued it ever since, watching these Sun games and that sort of thing. Like, again, at 35 years old, to just turn it on is like, all right, let's roll. Like, the buckets just don't stop. So I would put her in there. That's tough to do though. That is
Yeah,
really
man,
tough
it's a little tough. I guess I got one more question. This is kind of tough, and I kind of ask this question to certain people just because it
Yeah.
puts you in a very difficult spot. You're a
Okay.
Colts fan. Jim Irsay sells the team. They have to move out of Indy. Where did they go? Where do they go? Right? What does the uniform change, or what does the mascot change? And do you follow?
Oh my gosh. I think if they move, it would be somewhere with money, so probably like California. Another
Okay.
team in California. Now don't ask me what city, I don't know, but somewhere in California. What the colors look like, maybe it's this new Indiana Knights jersey that they just released because it's blue, but it's not blue. It's the heathered look, and it's kind of like the aquamarine, sort of thing with the black and the white. We'll roll with that. Let's say that's their jersey.
Okay, black, white, and blue. Okay.
Yeah. Do I follow them? Yeah, I'm following them because I've been invested at this point. I've been a Colts fan since 2000, we'll say 2007. Now if you didn't know, I'm originally from Texas. So I grew up a Cowboys fan, and I get plenty of grief from my family for not being a Cowboys fan, for not being a Texans fan. They talk about me something like serious for that. But I knew better.
Good decision.
Yeah, I knew better. I knew better. I made a business decision. But
you kept yourself out of the therapist's office for sure.
But I was invested at that point. Like, let me say that I've watched Peyton Manning come and go. I've watched Andrew Luck come and go. We're now onto the Anthony Richardson era, and I will still be here, when Anthony is here and not here and so forth. I've been invested in that team and the core, the fabric of what the organization is. People always jokingly tell me that I mention these folks like I know them personally, and I'm like, well, I kind of feel like I do. Before I started writing about the Colts, I was, watching them in games. And I was like, oh yeah, that's this guy. Oh yeah, that's this guy. And I went to my first Colts Falcons game some years ago, and my best friend was with me, and same thing. She's like, you're calling, this is when Andrew Luck was still playing, and she's like, you're calling these guys out like you live next door to them. And I said, that's because I've been following them. We are on a first name basis with everybody. Yeah. So I feel like, if they were to move, jerseys change, something happens, I'm still all in.
Oh yeah, I'm the same way because I tell people all the time I'm a day zero Titans fan, right? I'm a day zero Titans fan. So my mom worked with Dr. Elrod, who was, and I told the story on the Titans Fan Battle podcast, but my mom worked at Baptist. I'm sorry, at the time it was called Baptist. Now it's Ascension Midtown Hospital, but it was St. Thomas Baptist Hospital, the same team that still sponsors the Titans, the same place they still go to get their blood work done and their physicals and all that good stuff. They get sent there. Dr. Elrod was team surgeon and doctor. My mom worked on his team very closely with him. So I remember as being a 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid, Steve McNair with the sternum wired shut, right?
Wow.
Me and my dad taking my mom dinner up to the hospital, not knowing that Steve McNair, we just got done watching the game on TV. He gets off the elevator. He's in a wheelchair. His sternum is, I'm pretty sure, tender, right? To say the least. I'm like, Steve. He gets up. He takes a picture with me. Like it's those kind of things that you experience as a kid and as a fan, and you're like, yeah. So when we say we're on first name basis, when I say I walk into Titans camp and I don't say, hey, that's DeAndre Hopkins. No, that's DeAndre. Like, you're a Titan now, so we're on first name basis. Like, Aziz, what's up, man? Hey, how you doing? How's the family? Rand, what's going on? Right? Like, these are just people that you talk to because they're part of your team. And yes, I do puff my chest out because I'm like, yeah, Rand, like you're the GM, but I grew up with this team. Like, make sure you keep them in good hands, and those things. So. Yeah, I completely understand. Like when I'm sitting at home, my wife is like, you don't know him. Yes, I do.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
I do. I definitely know him.
But all right, awesome. This has been fun. We're definitely have to do this again. We're have to have you come back on. I'm sure probably for some sort of Titans talk, and definitely for WNBA more talk
For
as
sure.
well. And we'll get into some baseball talk too down the stretch. We'll do that. We'll have
Baseball
you come back.
is definitely in my wheelhouse.
Cool. Yeah, it's in mine too. And I don't know if you can see this, but I do have my World Champs Atlanta Braves shirt on. So it's in my wheelhouse too.
Yeah. I
I
can't
just
say
so
that
happen to be wearing that.
I can't say that for the Yankees as of right now, but we'll get there.
My condolences to you. All right.
26 championships. We're still.
Hey, listen, I know. I had to at least get my one dig.
The most in major American sports.
The one few time where the Yankees aren't doing well. So hey, I'm gonna take my dig.
I told one of my buddies, he's a Red Sox fan, and shout out to Mookie. Me and him played on the same travel baseball team. I always gotta throw that in there because that's my guy. But I told him, I was like, yeah, kick us while we're down. Now, I said, because as soon, I said, if we win one before I die, I said, I got a list, and y'all, I'm going to be so obnoxious if the Yankees win a championship. Like, because in 2009, my friends, they hated me. They couldn't stand me. Like, I wore New York Yankees gear to school, I think, for like 2 weeks straight. Like, they could not stand me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right. So tell the people where they can find you.
Oh, for sure. Find me on Twitter at DC Griffin. You can find me in Twitter Spaces all the time. Like, I'm in and out of sports Twitter Spaces, sports and coffee, facts and stats, sports after dark. I kind of dip into other teams, spaces as a reporter, and then they find out I'm a Titans fan. They're like, "Why is he here?" And it's like, because I like sports. I'm a fan of a team, but I do like sports. Find me on Thursdays this week, right, on the halftime show. Definitely gonna have to get you on there, Meg, at some point. But yeah, find me on the halftime show with Courtlandt Griffin. You can go on YouTube, type in the halftime show with Courtlandt Griffin, or just the halftime show. It'll pull it up. We've got shows on there. We're doing the NFL roundtable right now, so we're on the AFC West, and then we'll be on the NFC West next week. We'll take a week off, and then we'll be right back to your regularly scheduled program where we talk about all sports. But yeah, you find me on the 3-point conversion. Find me on there. Articles coming. I got my NFL prospect big board. So if you're a college football fan and you're a draft fan and your team is looking to see who they can draft, go check out my big board. We have the top 50 players coming into the season coming up. We'll also have Titans articles. Probably have some WNBA articles, some basketball articles, MLS articles. If you like it, you want it, it's there. You can always look up my name. And then just find me anywhere, right? Type in Courtlandt Griffin, Google, and find me, right? Like just, I'm open. I'm an open book. If you want to talk sports, we can talk sports. If you want to talk life, we can talk life. I'm a man at the end of the day. I just so happen to be a professional sports talker. But yeah, so thanks, Meg, for having me on. I appreciate it. This is fun. You got a heck of a setup here.
I try. I do it again. All right. So you can find me at Hall About Sports. That's HALL aboutsports.com. All of our social media is there because I can't remember it all off the top of my head. But it's usually some combination of Hall About Sports. But you'll find it there. It was right at the top of the website to the right. Go ahead and give us a follow. And of course, make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel so that we can continue building the brand out. You'll see my work there covering the Atlanta Dream. Also been covering Atlanta United and MLS. So that's been fun as well. And then, of course, you'll see my work with Colts Wire. Outside of that, make sure you follow me on Instagram and on Twitter. It's at the Megan Hall. That's THE and then my name, Megan Hall. All right. So you've been listening to the Hall About Sports podcast, where the sounds of the game are real, the sports are real, and the stories are real too. We will see you next episode. Peace out.